in replay mode. Today we are talking about intention over hustle. And hopefully, you're going to get some tips today about not feeling like you're running on the hamster wheel of social media content where you're putting in a lot of effort and you're not getting anywhere. Hamsters on treadmills. That's what we're talking. That's the visual image
We
that
need
I
a
want you
gift.
to you
We need a
have
gift to
today.
pop up.
We need a gift for that. But we want to welcome you all to the show to cultivate. This is a weekly show that we do every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern. And I really should memorize mountain time, but I never do. So I'm going to hand it over to Stephanie in just a moment. My name is Elizabeth Doss. I'm an animated GIF artist, but I'm also a social media consultant. And I help brands and businesses leverage social media platforms to build community, increase engagement, and build joy and bring joy to and so that's hopefully some of the things that we're going to tap into today. So I will hand it over to you, Stephanie.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Hello, everyone. I am Stephanie, as Elizabeth referenced. I'm the brand architect behind Take Roots Consulting. And at the end of the day, the way I like to frame it is, what am I doing? I am helping businesses and nonprofits really stand out with PR and marketing strategies that build trust, that spark those conversations both on and offline and drive real impact. I'm super excited because hustle culture is a real thing, and we want to break it down today. We want to talk about practical tips on how to show up, and even if this is just that friendly reminder of why you're showing up on social media platforms to begin with, it's kind of nice to be reminded, oh yeah, what's my why am I actually showing up and pushing all of the buttons? So with that, I know Elizabeth is already pushing buttons and helping share it out. If you're joining us on LinkedIn, we want to make sure that you're sharing it out into your network as well. Elizabeth, let's just dive right in. This is a big one. I know we like to keep our conversations about that half-hour mark. We invite people that are joining us to drop questions into the chat. So feel free to do that. I want to talk about, again, getting back to that hustle culture and how it can actually hurt your content creation. This belief that you need to be everywhere and doing all the things and showing up on every platform every day and posting multiple times a day and doing the stories, the reels, the feed posts, the pins, the YouTubes, the everything. So that's to set the stage for why. Why would you do that? That sounds exhausting. Instead of actually showing up with intention and purpose and understanding where your community actually is. What platforms are they on? Those are the platforms that you want to be showing up on. And more importantly, if you're just starting out, because we know that everybody's at a different spot in their journey, that also doesn't mean that you need to be on all those places at once. Get really good at one particular platform before you start adding another and another and another. So even if you know that you may have 100 followers on Instagram and you may have a couple of hundred over on Facebook and but don't spread yourself so thin. If Instagram is the platform that your community is at, they're on, they're active, they need to hear from you there and start to dive into that particular platform and understand the features. And hey, if anybody has been following in the last week, new features, new things happening all the time on platforms. So there's a lot to always stay on top of anyway. Let's not add more pressure in trying to show up multiple times a day and doing all of the things and pressing all the buttons, but doing it with intention. So again, show up to your community where they are. You don't need to be everywhere and you don't need to be posting multiple times a day. You're not going to break the algorithm. You're not going to probably figure it out. So creating content just for the sake of creating the content is probably a distraction for many. It's probably pulling you away from some of those goals because we all know that that takes time. So if we're doing it with intention and showing up and understanding why we're there and what value can we offer to our community, serve the people that are already following you Don't worry about the building and the growing and the adding, because everybody's always under this notion of, I want more. How do I get more? Well, the reality is, if you get an influx, which is always a wonderful feeling, but if you can't already show up to serve the people that are there with you right now, how are you going to serve more of them in different ways? And I think we often get lost in that. Over to you, Elizabeth.
It's very, very true that we get in this mindset where we think we're talking to the entire world. And what we lose in that is the intimacy of the community that you've already built. And if you are just, if, you know, it's that whole idea where maybe you've been at one of those events and you step up to talk to somebody and they look over your shoulder past you to shake the hand of the person behind you. If you're doing that digitally, where you're ignoring the people that are standing right in front of you that want to have a conversation with you and are constantly looking to, oh, there's somebody cooler on the other side of this, or I'm chasing the virality of this moment or this trend, then we're looking past the people that are standing directly in front of us. And so instead of, you know, it's, we've talked a little bit about this about in the beginning of the year, you know, people want to set goals and stuff, and there are numbers that you cannot control. You cannot control how many views you get or likes or saves or shares. You cannot control any of these metrics. But you can control how often you're posting, which we're, you know, we're talking about. It doesn't have to be every single second, but you can also control how much you're engaging with your audience. And so instead of thinking, oh, I've got to get a post out today, what if you started thinking, have I engaged with 5 of my followers today? And go through and do that. Now, I think that Instagram has come out with some new ways for us to stay up to date with people that we're connecting with. I'm going to give you 3 quick tips on how to find those spots to engage with people that are already in your community. This is, again, this is a method to get out of the hustle where you have to post. This is so that when you do post, the people that you want to see your content are going to see it. One is to go to your profile, hit the followers number, and look through that. Anybody with a pink yellow ring around their name means they've posted to their Instagram stories in the last 24 hours. Go into 5 of those accounts, watch the stories, and leave a kind, legitimate comment or question on someone's post that they have done. So you can, bam, you can do that. In the Reels feed now, when you touch the Reels feed at the bottom, you're going to see 2 new things that happened in the last week. One is you can tap where the Reels side of things is and change it to nearby. So if you're a local brick and mortar type of, if you're wanting to build community in your actual physical community, tap that nearby thing and go in and comment thoughtfully on 5 of those posts. Maybe follow some people from it. Maybe send them a message and say, that was really cool when you did this. Where were you at? And ask some genuine questions, but start to go in the nearby. Then finally, in that same Reels area, in the top corner, I think on my phone when I'm looking at it, it's in the top right-hand corner, you're going to see these tiny little profile pictures that show up there. Those tiny little people are people that you follow. You guys follow each other, and their Instagram is saying, hey, check out what your friends are liking. Check out what they're watching. So when you tap that, it's going to show you things that they're interacting with. Well, of course, you can comment on the post itself, but what if you commented and DM'd the person that shared it and say, hey, I saw that post about the thing too. It was really funny, and let it be an organic type conversation. So I wanted to throw that in there. There are some tools, especially right now that Instagram is giving us to do this. This is the same thing. You can do this on LinkedIn as well. Go to your followers and go through the feed and look through for people that you know that you want to interact with, and leave a comment. And so here's your strategy on LinkedIn. Leave a comment that could be a standalone post. So continue the conversation that they're having. Don't just say, great job, that's awesome, fire emoji. Like, no, leave a question or a thoughtful comment that's relevant to what they're talking about, because it gets served up to their followers And when their followers interact, then it gets served up to those followers. It truly is a networking type of app. So anyway, I'll hand thing. I know I got kind of specific, and I know I'm talking about engagement, but what I'm trying to say is to get out of the hustle mindset that you've got to broadcast, broadcast, broadcast. No, you need to have conversations, and one way to do that is to build the engagement thing. So I am going to throw things back to you,
Well, I
Stephanie.
think you hit on something so important, right? The engagement is the conversation. And we can have that in the comments. And we can start online and then move that offline, right? Or in the DMs and do those follow ups. The other thing that is important is when we are creating, and I touched on this earlier, you know, your community is there. Create for them, not for the algorithm, not for the trends. Not the, that doesn't mean that you can't have fun, right? Show up with your personality. People do business with people, so they need to know, right? They're following you though for a reason. So serve that content up to them. If you recall, and I'm sure you've seen it a million times, and you spoke about this already, Elizabeth, is this notion that um, we can't control the views, we can't control those things. Right, but how we're showing up and then engaging with just that community. Instagram is serving up our content differently now, as are other platforms, of course, but it is about just creating for those people that are there now with the change up in the way these platforms, like, again, I know I speak a lot about Instagram, it's one of my favorite platforms for engaging, that new reels, right? Now you can go up to 3 minutes. So before, when you were like, oh gosh, short form content, I've got to cut this down. I've got to make sure it hits within 15 seconds. Well, sure, there's still a hook thing there. We got to figure that out. That 2 to 3 seconds, what is it? All of it. But now, imagine the value you can offer to your community when you're trying to do a, let's say, a step-by-step tutorial, when you're trying to teach them and create some of that evergreen but yet educational content, stuff that is relevant in your industry, in your niche, how you can show up and serve your community. Again, thinking about the longevity of the content, the engagement, talking to the people that are there already. Focus on them and create for your community, not for the algorithm.
It's so good because it's something I had written down. Stephanie, sorry, I'm posting your quotes out on LinkedIn. By the way, guys, we are live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. You can join us in whatever whatever realm
Whatever
you'd love to.
land.
But we would love for you to join us on Riverside .fm here. And if you're interested, please reach out to us on any of those platforms. We'll get you the link so that you could join the conversation here with us. But when we talk about intention, Stephanie, um, I've been onboarding some new social media clients, and we've been talking about what is their target market? Who is their target audience?
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times we are just shotgun blasting everybody and their brother, and yet we're not speaking specifically to the person that we're looking for. And so I've learned this when we're in working with our friend Richard Liverman is to get out of the hey Scott, nice to have you here. Scott from Auden Hospitality in the house. But getting out of the tech speak of what we do. Like for instance, with me doing some of the animation stuff, I was getting really lost in tech and talking the technical stuff with people. I still have
Yeah.
to do better at this, even like with my social media clients, that I don't get it lost in the tutorials and the buttons that they need to push and the tech part of it. Really stepping back and saying, okay, what are they asking me to do when I'm approaching this? But getting in that mindset of who is my actual target audience, and what are my goals with this audience? And when we can have those conversations of my goal is this, then we can start to reverse engineer the
Mm.
things that we would want that need to happen for that to be the goal. And so I've been doing this with my to do list of I've reordered my to do list that I put my the goal at the bottom, the fruit that I want to see come from this event, and then I retrofit. Okay, how if that's the fruit I'm wanting, what are the steps that need to take place beforehand to lead to that conversation? So if I am a business that is selling, I always go back to selling candles, Stephanie. I don't know why. It's not like I know anyone in my life that sells candles, but whatever. If my goal is to sell candles, then I need to think about the circumstances or the conversations in which someone would want a candle. We think about you have to think of it through the lens of the person wanting that service, not just how you want to sell them that candle, because that's where it gets desperate and it's not cute. Um, and so, how can you reform your ideas to do that thing? So, thinking about the scenarios in which your perfect buyer would want to have a candle in that moment. Let's say relaxing after a long day, taking a bath. We'll set that scene of the candle being lit by the bathtub. Maybe have a mom standing in the middle of the kitchen with wide eyes and crazy hair, something burning. The child is wiping chili all over the stuff. The dog is getting the garbage. She's just standing there as it pans out, and then she just breathes in her candle like, okay, it's all gonna be okay. This is the all. It's gonna all be okay. So how can you connect and commiserate and have an emotional moment and tell your client's story in the middle of it? And I know you have to be careful about like not exposing people and that type of stuff, but there's a way to do it with a high level bird's eye view to say, to tell the story of the mom that's had that kind of day and how she can end it with something relaxing. But how can you harness those scenarios and those stories to connect with your audience in a different type of way? What would be your goal for them, for your audience to find? And then how can
Mhm.
you reverse engineer it? I'll hand it back to you, Steph.
Well, yeah, and you'll see what Richard is dropping in the chat over on LinkedIn, and I think what's key here is to remember that we can reframe content creation as a tool and not just a to-do list, like that we have to check it off. So that's when we get back to that intention piece. Why am I showing up? Who am I showing up for? And just getting crystal clear on that. We've talked so much over these last 3+ years in different platforms, Elizabeth, about content pillars, content buckets, what those look like, and how we can show up. So when people are just starting out, or maybe they have been creating for a while, but they're feeling a little bit of that burnout, and how do they just get everything figured out at the top line based on their goals on showing up on multiple platforms. I do continue to go back to, if you understand content pillars or have content buckets, do that and then do some mind mapping. So, what do I mean when I'm talking specifically about content pillars? So, I say there's like three of them, right? So, a third of your content can be educational. So, those are those step by steps. Those are the pieces of content that really position you as maybe a thought leader, right? Showing that experience, teaching, serving up that value in an educational way to your community. The next bucket, if you will, or pillar, is a third of that content can be around inspiration, motivation for your community. Tell your story. What's your origin story, right? How did you start? What are those you've heard of, messed up Mondays, or feel good Fridays? What are those little bits of stories, those inspiration, those motivations? I wish I had told myself. I wish I knew. Hey, these are the wins. You can frame that up to your community, and let's be honest, people may not always engage, but we know people are watching, and you can inspire and motivate, and they get to know who you are, which leads me to that kind of last pillar, which is about you, your business, your product, your service offering. again, people do business with people. And so for them to be able to go, hey, I'd like to work with Elizabeth, I think um, there's a way that she can teach me how to use these things that she calls gifts and sparks of joy in my content creation, in my overall strategy. I'm going to reach out to her because of the way you've served it up to community. You are showing them how to use something. You're showing them why you offer or do what you do. And now they've made that connection. So it's a little sprinkle of these bits of different types of content that make it a lot easier to break it down. So maybe you're not feeling as overwhelmed because with all the new features, with all these new opportunities that we have to engage, we forget about the basics. Meet people where they are. Not everybody is in the same part of their journey. So even someone like myself, that I talked about, I'm a brand architect, right? I love to talk about that traditional, like the PR, the marketing strategies, but not everybody is, ready to launch a new product or a nonprofit ready to raise that $100,000 and do a full campaign around it. Some people are just like, where do I even start? And so you need to have bits and pieces of that content that feed into the different members of your bigger community because we're all at different stages. And I think it's really important to meet people where they are.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. I love it. Okay, I'm bringing out the whiteboard of doom. That's what we always say. We were talking, Steph was talking a little bit about mind mapping. And I just wanted to do a quick example of what that might look like for you. So I know I'm just going to go with Scott because I know he's in the audience and I know that he works with hotels. Well, if I'm starting with my hotel idea, there's a couple of things that little ideas that I could start to pull away from. So that's guest room experience. We could talk amenities. We could talk what the lobby is like or the restaurant, etc. Like, so there's all these other little things that you can do, but you can also bring in holidays. So what does a romantic getaway for Valentine's Day, because it's coming up, what does that look like? Or maybe if someone is coming to the area because they have family graduating at the big university, that's their celebrations, graduations, keeping track of anniversaries, etc. So how could you go through and just start to think about all the different ways that people might use it? Conferences, like people might be meeting up to do this for conferences. But again, you can do this for products as well. So if we were doing a product version of this, let's see, Stephanie, pick something that's sitting on your desk that we could do as a
Um,
product.
how about a latte?
A latte, yes. So you are a coffee snob. No. Let's say a coffee
Kinda.
shop. Coffee conversations. You could do coffee quotes about coffee. You could commiserate about spilling coffee. You could talk about the process of the beans itself, or the process of the creating the latte itself. You could do latte art. So you could work through the process. You could talk about the weather and how the coffee soothes all needs in the weather time. But also, the memes, etc., but also showing the atmosphere of what it's like to take that first sip. So trying to sit down and, instead of like hustling in the sense of constantly making something new, you could intentionally create things that constantly are pointing back to this. This is something Stephanie does really well. In fact, when people think they see coffee memes, I do this. There's coffee reels. I totally sent her one this week. When I see it, I think of her, and it's because she has established that as a part of what she's doing. And so, how can you do that? Creating that cult following around things that you can't live without. We know Richard's is pink Nike shoes. We know that anytime I see something pink, I'm going to think of "Don't Be Boring," and I'm going to think of Richard. And so, how can you take those little things that mean so much to you and incorporate them, in your daily posts. And so I hope that in the mind mapping side of things, it helps you, because now I can go back into that and create 4 posts each for those different ideas, and I can have a month's worth of content figured out because I've taken the time to separate out my thoughts. I think when we stare at a blank page or a blank canvas, we get overwhelmed. Like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. Yes, you do. How can you have a conversation about your product in the context of holidays, celebrations, quotes, in people's everyday storytelling life situations? I'll hand things back to you, Stephanie.
Thanks, Elizabeth. That was great. I think you need to get into LinkedIn and respond, but I'm going to respond for you and say, yes, Richard, the answer is yes. You can hire Elizabeth and the whiteboard for content creation. But do you see how that mind mapping exercise is so very useful? I couldn't agree more, Elizabeth, that when you're going, what am I going to post today? Because it feels like it's again on the to do list, as opposed to if you're showing up with intention and understanding why I'm on Instagram. Why am I on LinkedIn? Why do I have a blog? Why do I have a newsletter? And answer those questions and circle it back to what are the goals that you're trying to do this year. We talked about, starting strong. Starting strong just means, listen, give yourself some grace along the way. There's a lot coming at us every single day. And, we're also, as business owners, we've got client deliverables. So when does it make sense as well to give yourself the space to do that mind mapping? Is it a weekend exercise when maybe you're sitting with, you know, tea, a latte, a something, and you're just looking at the week ahead? When you break it down, as Elizabeth suggested in the mind mapping exercise, then you go, oh, yeah, you know what? Further break that down, and I've got 3 bits of content over here, and I can celebrate my client win here, and I can do these things. It starts to become a lot easier to map out what the next week of content will be, or potentially, yes, the next month. And I know many people that are very good at scheduling out lots of content. Me, not so much, right? I do a little bit, and then I actually am more of a on the fly kind of person, or at least just looking at this upcoming week and what is something that I can speak to that's meaningful, that still maybe sparks a little joy, sparks some conversation. I want to be able to get people talking in the comments. You alluded to that earlier as well, Elizabeth. When you are engaging, set aside those few minutes, whether it's in the morning during your coffee tea break or in the evening when you just have some quiet time to engage in a meaningful way. So it's not just about the content creation side, it's actually you. This is not a one way, just push the content out and they will come. It requires you to do the work, right? To have that conversation, to engage with your community. And it's not just when they are dropping a question, a comment, an emoji, a GIF on your content. You need to go back out there and tap them. So I love all of the suggestions that you made earlier about, again, new stuff happening on Instagram. Top right hand corner on my screen, I think it's the same for you, Elizabeth. This new idea that the people that you are already connected to, and you'll see their little tiny profiles with their little hearts, that means that they've engaged in a piece of content, and now Instagram is serving that up to you as say, hey, this is what your community is enjoying, maybe you'll like it too. So that's another opportunity to start the conversation. So as we get ready to wrap this conversation for this week, until next week, Elizabeth, any final thoughts? Any homework? I know you already suggested a few things, but what would you like to leave us with today?
Yes. It's this idea of quality over quantity. Now, I I think it's a permission slip for people to operate under either viewpoint, because I think that there are people that do well in just documenting what they're doing throughout the day. And that may feel like hustle for a lot of people. But on the other side, the people that are documenting throughout the day, for them to sit down and try to curate or come up with a post, it's exhausting because you get, what do I say, and I don't even know what to say, and all the things. And so how can you need to learn what your style of creation mode works best for you. And we did a show last week about this. If you want to go back and watch one of our past episodes, you can find our channel on YouTube if you search at Cultivate Weekly in your YouTube search. And please subscribe to the show. We would love to have you guys there as well. But my point in that is understanding how you do this best so that you could get out of the hustle mindset and get into the you're just showing up to talk to the one person on the other side of that post. And so I think it's been a great conversation. If you have any questions about what this looks like for you or your brand, please feel free to reach out to Stephanie and I. We're always looking for future topics, and maybe you'll find yourself on the whiteboard of examples next time. Anyway, I will hand things back to you, Stephanie, to wrap us up for today.
Well, that sounds like a challenge, and I love that. So, why don't we put that out there? If you have a question, the topic, something that you're struggling with, it will make its way to the whiteboard on a future episode. I promise, because I'm speaking on behalf of Elizabeth. She is the whiteboard queen. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, watching on the replay. Again, my final thoughts are just reframe in your own mind that content creation is a tool. Okay, it is a tool. It is not just a box that you check off on your to-do list. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next week.